What's up, guys? I'm BTC. With the recent Sombra buffs, Brigitte being added, both of them have a crowd control ability. So the question is, should Overwatch have more CC? Overwatch has a wide variety of crowd control abilities, or CC for short. They range from simple stuff that just do one minor thing, all the way up to full lockdown stuns that prevent any action by the player. Now, there's no question that not being able to control your character, move, attack, or any of that sort of stuff can be frustrating. So there needs to be a very delicate balance between what the crowd control abilities are able to do, and yet still maintain a fast, fun-paced environment for the game. Let's quickly go over some of the differences. First, you have, on the lighter end, the slows and the snares that just reduce your movement speed, or they might reduce your attack speed, that sort of thing. Another kind of light crowd control is the forced movement. This would be Roadhog's Hook, Lucio's Boop, Pharah's Concussive, all that sort of stuff where it forcibly moves you around, but it doesn't disable you in any other way. Moving up a little bit, you have something called a root, which is basically an immobilize. It's a trap like Junkrat has, and what it will do is prevents you from moving, but you can still use most of your abilities, you can still attack, all that sort of stuff. Next up, you would have something called an incapacitate or a sleep, which prevents your character from doing anything, but is broken the moment you take any damage at all. And there's a slight variation on this called a Disorient, which does basically the same thing, except your character will kind of wander around a little bit instead of just sitting still. Next would be a Silence, which is effectively what Sombra's hack does. It prevents you from using any of your abilities, but you can still attack and you can still move around and all that sort of stuff. On the other side, you would have something called a Disarm, which would prevent you from attacking, but you could still use your abilities and move around. So it's kind of like the opposite of a hack. And then you have the next step up, which combines both the Silence and the Disarm into something called a Hex or a Polymorph, and this will prevent you from attacking or using any abilities, but you can still move around. So the exact opposite of a root. The next one's a bit odd. It's usually called a Cyclone or a Void. Your character is completely disabled, you can't do anything at all, but at the same time, none of the enemies can hurt you in any way either. Currently, the only thing in-game that does this is Doomfist's ultimate, but that's a friendly and not an enemy ability. Next is one of the hardest crowd controls, which is a stun. You're completely locked out from moving, attacking, using any abilities, and of course, you can take full damage for the duration. Also, the freeze effect is just another kind of stun. The last one, and probably the hardest of all crowd control, is the Charm. Another player has complete control over your character, and you can't do anything about it. So now you should fully understand all the different crowd controls, and I'm sure you can recognize some of them in the game. Now, the question is, should Blizzard be adding more of this? And obviously, as I said, it's a delicate balance because you don't want to fully lock people down because then that's not fun. But at the same time, the game is currently heavily dominated by high mobility dive characters. And if you add more kinds of crowd control into the game, it's going to give you a way to counter some of those high mobility dive characters. And I think overall, Blizzard has done a pretty good job of dealing with the crowd control in terms of strength versus duration. So the stronger the crowd control is, the more stuff gets locked out, the less time it should last. That's why McCree and Brigitte's stuns last for a very, very short amount of time, less than a second. But then you have stuff like the Junkrat trap, which will hold you immobilized for a little while. If Blizzard continues to adhere to that sort of design, I think it's fine that they add more CC, because if you get stunned but it lasts for less than a second, that's not really that big of a deal. But really, I think adding more light CC would definitely help out with dealing with those high mobility characters, the dive, all that sort of stuff. If you're able to just slow them down a little bit, or maybe prevent them from using their attacks for only a couple of seconds, I think that's going to go a long way in helping to deal with the overwhelming amount of Diva, Tracer, Winston kind of stuff that we have going on right now. Of all the crowd control on that list, 4 of them are not currently in Overwatch. And I think if they were included, it would allow for some really cool and interesting tactics and gameplay. The first one is the Cyclone Void thing, which would allow you to take an enemy completely out of the fight for 2 to 3 seconds. Really short duration, you don't want to completely sideline them, but use it on their tank or their DPS or the healer, whatever it happens to be. Just take them out of the fight for like 2 seconds. You can't do any damage to them, but they can't do anything either. Really clever use of this could be powerful. Next one is Disarm. I'm not really sure about that one though, because I don't think it would really work too well. The other 2 are going to be the Hex and then the Charm, and these are incredibly powerful crowd control abilities, so I don't think they could be anything less than an ultimate, because if you had this as a regular ability, it would have to last for less than a second, and it just simply wouldn't be worth it. I mean, it would effectively be the same thing as a really short stun. So if you're going to include the Hex or the Charm, they're going to have to be those ultimates. The Hex would be similar to Reinhardt's ult, but it would probably have to have a larger radius or a longer range, and maybe an ever so slightly longer duration, only because the enemy can actually move, whereas with the Reinhardt stun they can't. The Charm would be really interesting, but at the same time, I think a lot of people would really, really hate it. Because imagine like how Junkrat controls the Rip Tire, that's what would happen, except instead of controlling the tire, you would be controlling an enemy player. So you could pick one of their DPS and suddenly turn around and start attacking the rest of their team. Or you could pick their tank and just drop the shield or whatever. I think what would often happen, depending on the map, is the Charm would be used for like several seconds, and then the person would just kind of fling themselves off the edge of the map to get that one free elimination. Finding the duration for this, let's compare it to other ultimate crowd controls. So Reinhardt has a stun that lasts for 2.5 seconds and it can hit everybody. Zarya has the grab, which can grab everybody, and it lasts for 4 seconds. So because the Charm would obviously have to be single target, you're probably talking about 4 to 6 seconds worth of charm time. Now keep in mind, this doesn't make it a 7 versus 5, because you have to give up control of your own character in order to take the enemy. So it would be a 6 versus 6, and then it would turn into a 6 versus 5 once the charm is in effect. But that brings up the really interesting question of, what do you do when one of your teammates, let's say a McCree, gets controlled? Do you then just let him continue to damage your team and wait until the duration is up? Or do you have to take him out? And also, this brings up another kind of balance question here, but what abilities are going to be available to the person that is controlling the character? Are they going to have access to your ultimate as well? So could they just, mind control someone on your team and then completely waste the ultimate? That might be a little too strong, but then again, depending on how long it takes for them to build the mind control ult, it might be a possibility. So what do you guys think about all of the crowd control abilities in Overwatch? Is there too much? Should they add more? And if so, what kinds? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching. Make sure to check out my Discord server. Follow me on Twitch and Twitter. The links for that stuff are down below. And remember, always blame the controller, because it's never your fault. Also, special thanks to all my Patreon supporters for helping to make this all possible. If you'd like to see what kind of cool rewards you can get for supporting the channel, check the links on screen and down below.